Sorry.
It's all right. It's hard with no visual cues. Yeah. Am I good to go?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry for that little confusion. It's always difficult without any visual cues to know, what's going on. But yes, thank you very much for inviting me here to speak today. I am very, very excited to share. I've curated and groomed like a great list of content and materials that we're going to go through today. I do want to point out before we get going, if you take notes digitally, if you take notes old school, pen and paper, I do have a lot of content and resources and materials to help you be successful, especially in the early part of your career today. So just as a heads up, pull out a notebook or something, you might want to jot down some notes, things to follow up on. Questions you might have. This is a very, very dense lecture I'm about to give as far as content goes. So just a heads up and a warning. So bottom line up front, what are you going to get out of this talk, right? When you're done in an hour, you are going to get at least 5 different cybersecurity focused career paths. I'm going to dig deep into 5 specific ones. We're going to cover a bunch, but it'll be really at the surface level, and I'm going to drill deep on 5. Then I'm also going to be covering, as I mentioned, a ton of resources to really help you explore those 5 and other potential areas of cybersecurity, and really that are tailored for people who are earlier in their career, right? So that's going to be just a giveaway to you guys. And then really I wanted to provide some things that I wish I had known early in my career. And that'll be sprinkled throughout the talk, but I will spend a few minutes at the end, maybe the last 10 minutes, providing just tips and best practices, things that you're not going to get in a classroom, right? Like there's not a textbook, there's not a curriculum on doing some of the things that will help you stand out and be successful in getting interviewed for the job, securing the job, and then ultimately having a successful career path. So really quick about me, who am I? As I was introduced at the beginning, my name is Gerald Auger. I am a cybersecurity subject matter expert, for lack of a better term. I've been working in the field for over 15 years. I've got, a couple degrees in computer science and cyber operations, which is what my Ph.D.'s in. I'm very, very passionate about the field in general. And it's given me so much, so it gives me a lot of pleasure and a lot of satisfaction to be able to share and collaborate with the community and provide all the great resources to everybody. I do have a YouTube channel called Simply Cyber, where I do post weekly, and the content is very similar to what I'll be talking about today. So if you want to engage with me after the talk, I'm on Twitter pretty active, and I'm on YouTube pretty active, and LinkedIn. I'm happy to keep the conversation going. So I want to take a step back for a second, because this is important to me. So when I went through my undergrad, I got a BS in computer science from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And when the computer science program, you do programming, you do databases, you do networking, operating systems. And I didn't have like a mentor or anyone, like computer science was totally foreign to like my family, my social network, everything like that. So I was just kind of figuring it out as I went. I had no idea. I just knew that I really loved technology and computers. So the idea that was kind of drilled into me just through the program was that I was supposed to become a software developer. And you can see here on the right, this is on the top, it's the LAMP stack, which I guess has been superseded by the MEAN stack now. But LAMP is basically Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And this is a model view controller paradigm design pattern for the way that modern web applications are built. So when I went through, it was like, okay, like you learn how to program first and foremost, then you learn how networks work so your programs can communicate, right? You got to learn how databases work so you can store data. You got to know operating systems so you know how to write code for different things. Like everything circled around being a software developer, when in reality, there was a ton of other opportunities like being a DBA or being a network engineer or being a program manager on a technology project. Like none of those options were obvious to me. I thought I had one path I could walk. And that's why I'm so excited to share with you guys that there are a ton of different paths within cybersecurity. It isn't just one. Like maybe you think that there's just pen testing, right? Because that's the big sexy one that Hollywood highlights and people think is the coolest. But really, this is a slide that Naomi Buckwalter from Energage put together and I borrowed. And this just gives you uh, a real perspective on the sheer scope and size of opportunity within cybersecurity, right? So just to call out a couple, right? Like you could be a crypto person who's like hard into math and you're doing PKI infrastructure and encryption technology, you're going to work in GRC and be focused on awareness training, right? These are two wildly different job career paths, but they're all within the cybersecurity space. You got obviously like your blue team stuff over here. I'm sure if I read this eye chart a little bit more, I'd find the red team stuff. But what I want you to take away is this slide. You can map it, all of these items, to career paths within cybersecurity. And I can't emphasize enough, we are going to drop into 5 specific ones at great detail, but find what passion, and maybe it's not cybersecurity, but there is so much in cyber, and of course it pays well, and there's tons of job opportunities, and that's great. But like, if you can find passion in something specific, it'll be the best thing you ever did. So let's take a closer look at actually 5 specific ones. Now I've selected these 5 because they are, I want to say there's a wealth of opportunity. These aren't super niche-y, super high, 25 years of experience type jobs. These are, tailored for the 0 to 3 and really like 3 to 7 years things. Just as a heads up on the legend for the 5 different jobs I'm going to talk about, there'll be an infographic where the picture is that kind of explains it and everything. You can go back and dig into that afterwards. There's a lot of content. On the right, I'm going to provide, on the top right, I'm going to provide like one of the coolest things about that job. And on the bottom, I'm going to give you one of the worst things about that job, because it doesn't matter what job you have. It could be the best job in the world. There's got to be something downside about it, right? Not everything is awesome all the time. So I'm going to reveal that to you too. So the very first one that I want to get into is incident responder. Now, these graphics with the extra detail comes from the NICERC, which is a US government-based org. They resolve now to cyber.org if you put in that URL, but basically it's a US government agency that helps develop curriculum for cybersecurity programs. They do a lot of K through 12 stuff, but this content is fairly spot on. The only thing I would argue is that the median salary is probably about 20% higher than what you will find in reality. Okay, so having said that, incident responder, this is the person who is like SecOps. They're called blue team sometimes. This job is, there's a lot of this job. You either work at a managed systems, a managed security system provider, solution provider, whatever you want to call it. And basically businesses send their network traffic to those MSSPs, and, people are working the desks, manning it and watching it and stuff like that. And, being alerted when there's intrusions and everything like that. Like a lot of Hollywood movies, you'll always see the person who's like, like usually the good guys, they're like, oh no, like they got past our firewall, blah, blah, blah. Like those are the blue team people. That's what this does. This is a really cool job. Like you will find a lot of job opportunity and stuff like this. You get to solve kind of interesting puzzles and stuff like that. You could see the pro of this job. Like that's a mountain biker doing an awesome jump. You will get some really wild, some really cool things, because you're defending from active attacks. Like someone is attacking your organization, network, your people, whatever it is, and you are the front line. You're defending from live attack. So it's very, very cool. The one downside about this is bad guys don't work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and they don't take holidays off. Okay, so in 2014, if some of you recall, Lazarus Group, or no, not Lazarus Group, excuse me, Lizard Squad, who's kind of like akin to Anonymous, if you've heard of them. Lizard Squad, they actually denial of service attacked Microsoft's Network and PlayStation Network. So if anyone in here got a cool video game like Call of Duty or something for Christmas that year, they couldn't play it online because Lizard Squad denial of service attacked both of those networks. So the people at Microsoft and PlayStation or Sony who were working those desks had to leave and go to work that day on Christmas morning, and they didn't get off until 2 a.m. on the 26th. So being a defender is awesome, but you don't get to pick and choose when you're defending, right? It's like you work a normal job, but then there's a lot of burnout and stress because you have to deal with it when the problem happens, right? So just be aware of that. If what I just told you sounds exciting and this is for you, like you like the challenge of defending multiple doors and being that defender, I've included, and again, this is for afterwards, but I've included 3 good resources for you to check out. This first one is amazing. So this is a YouTube video by Eric Capuano, who's the CTO of Recon InfoSec, which is one of those MSSPs I mentioned. He's like a wicked seasoned incident responder, blue team guy, but this is Urgent IT Update. He walks through, it's probably 45 minutes. He walks through an entire incident from, we've detected something weird, all the way, booting the bad guy out, doing the write-up and all that. Like the full span of what that job would entail. So if you are remotely interested in, and you're willing to invest 45 minutes in your future, I would recommend checking that out because that will tell you exactly what this job really looks like at the keyboard. And then I've included a couple other things. Elastic Stack is kind of a free, there's this thing called Elk Stack, which is kind of how a SIM tool ingests logs and how blue teamers would look at them. You can get some free training on that. And if you really want to go nuts, like this is 45 minutes. This one is a full semester long course from NYU that gives you, it's around cyber threat detection in real time. So you can go real deep if you want. I'd recommend doing the 45-minute course first and see if it's a good fit. The next job is cyber forensics expert. So now this is kind of part and parcel with the blue team of the cyber incident responder we just talked about, except they typically, the incident responder puts the fire out. The forensics expert figures out who started the fire, and if the person who started the fire or the group who started the fire is still somewhere in the network holding a pack of matches waiting for you to go away so they can light another fire, or if they're quietly leaving breadcrumbs or persistence mechanisms, sometimes they're called, to allow them back in afterwards. So the forensics expert actually figures out what it was. This is meticulous work, long hours, interesting puzzles. You got to understand technology quite a bit. That's why the Rubik's Cube's here. It's very involved. You get to go on to bits and bytes into the disk and dead disk analysis and stuff like that. You can analyze malware in memory while it's actively running if it's a bit more complicated. This is a really cool field. These are the people who get interviewed in court cases on, what happened, or, tell me why, or whatever. Like, this is what that is. So this is kind of fun. I put the negative here is the clock, like time, like you could spend, a long time doing an analysis and maybe not find anything, because how do you prove a negative, right? You don't know if you've completely exhausted all possibilities and you just didn't actually uncover something, right? So that's what the clock is there. So if this is for you, you're big into the forensics and you like, figuring out why, I've put a couple resources here. This is Nullbyte, which is, kind of an online group that does some really, really great cybersecurity tutorials. But Kali Linux, which is oftentimes associated with pen testing, actually has a nice forensics meta package suite that you can install and do stuff with. So they actually have a nice write-up here on how to get that package installed and how to play with some of the different things if you'd like to get into it. Again, I've got a formal course here on digital forensics if you want to go all in and really commit yourself. And then I have a NIST reference here on how to incorporate digital forensics into incident response. And NIST is like a think tank for the United States, and they publish all sorts of great cybersecurity stuff. The third one is the cybersecurity engineer. Now, this is kind of like a catch-all one. Usually, like the generic terms in the field are analyst or engineer. Engineer is kind of hands-on, very tech-related. They could be the person working the firewalls. They could be the person working the mobile device management or the CASB solution. Typically, you will evolve from engineer, junior engineer, whatever, middle, senior, and then architect, because you have that background and awareness of like how the technology integrates and where the security weaknesses are, and really how to understand um, how to build these masterpieces, as I've put over here. Which is, pretty cool. You can be involved with this, like some really cool projects, some really cool initiatives. You will work with this role works heavily with other parts of the organization, and especially like infrastructure. Like, so the people who are working the networking and the endpoints, like the managed workstations or the servers, you'll be working with them a lot, because a lot of the solutions that the engineer builds will be integrated with those devices. So you get to build some really cool stuff and work with some interesting people. The downside, this guy, he's trying to capture just frustration. So I want to say that it's frustrating because you can say, like, patch your stuff, for example, patch your stuff, or the firewall is locked down, you can't have access to it. But then either like the business speaks, and sometimes the business doesn't care, right? So like, patch your systems. Well, this system, Jerry, can only go down for 15 minutes a month, and we have to apply application patches that introduce new functionality that the customers want, or that the product owner wants, or whatever. And we just don't have time to do your patches. We'll do them next month. And then next month comes and goes. Like, anytime you hear about these like data breaches because of patches, like a couple months ago or last year maybe, Equifax was hit with the Apache Struts vulnerability. They had a external facing system that had a gross unpatched Apache Struts vulnerability, where the patch had been out for a while. And it looks like negligence, but in the reality, the cybersecurity team does not manage those endpoints. They don't manage the infrastructure. The infrastructure team does. So it can be very frustrating when you know what needs to be done and you're getting either stonewalled, or you're just getting no response or crickets and no support from leadership. So be aware of that. If this sounds good for you, even though I feel like I just painted a horrible story, if this sounds good to you, you can use MITRE ATT&CK framework, which is MITRE is another think tank in the United States, and they actually put this MITRE ATT&CK framework, which basically fully encapsulates every possible way that threat actors can kind of affect your systems, from infection to persistence, exploitation, and stuff like that. This is a great resource to kind of give you some exposure. Again, the idea is that you would grow into someone who's like architecting and engineering solutions. I've got a Fortinet free access. All this stuff is free, by the way. I should have told you that. All the resources I recommend are free. This is just specific training on a specific technology. And then I added AWS Cloud Security here. So AWS is obviously incentivized for you. Whoops. They're obviously incentivized for you to understand how AWS works, so then you can go work somewhere and implement AWS, right? So they're incentivized. So they give training away for free, which is great. I will point out there's AWS, Google Cloud, and Microsoft Azure. AWS owns about 64% of the overall global cloud market. So 2/3 of the entire market is Amazon, AWS. So learning how to do security, if you're going to pick one cloud platform, I'd pick AWS. And as a, anecdotal note, I see a lot of web applications that are built in AWS now. Like, I do a lot of stuff at my day job as an information security architect at a large academic medical center, and I'm seeing AWS stuff all the time. So understanding how to secure that stuff is going to get you a job. Okay, so just be aware of that. That's a great one. Great recommendation if you're not sure. Of course, you got to want to be the engineer. All right. Cyber operator. Now, this is code for pen tester, ethical hacker. The official title in the field is cyber operator, or just an operator. These are the people who typically you're breaking into stuff, you're doing recon. This is like the sexiest job in the field because it's a lot of fun and you get to pretend to be a criminal, basically. There's tons and tons of tools. People are doing all sorts of open source tools. People integrate. There's a huge community that supports, this red team type work. this penetration testing type work. There's definitely a career path in this. As I mentioned before, web apps are like blowing up as kind of an area within industry, and being able to pen test those. By the way, you can do it remotely because it's a web application, right? It's supposed to be accessible from the internet. By pen testing those, you're giving that assurance to the vendors that their product, or to the developer, software engineer, that is their product is secure, right? Because no one wants to be on the front page. The best thing about this job is you get to be the cool hacker person, right? Like, it's awesome, right? It's cool. The hoodie, whatever you want. You get to do a lot of cool stuff. And when you pop a shell on someone's machine that you're not supposed to be in, it's very exhilarating because you basically have broken in, right? The downside, and any pen tester will tell you this, is whatever you do in this phase, whatever successes you have, whatever you find, you have to write it all down in a report. And a lot of people in this job don't like writing, period. They like working, hacking on a keyboard and breaking stuff. They don't like writing reports. And so that's the downside. But if you don't have a problem writing reports, you're good to go. So it's an acquired taste, I've been told. This one, median salary, 100 grand, maybe in the Pacific Northwest, but this job does get you paid. And there's, some certifications and stuff like that. So if this is what you're into, I called out Metasploit training. So Metasploit is a framework that you can use. It's got a bunch of tools built into it. It's mostly for exploitation, but it's a great tool. You should learn it. It comes built in with Kali typically. Hackersploit is a YouTube content creator, and he's got a great series covering it really, really well. I've watched it and I recommend it. Again, free. Hack the Box is actually a site that has different VMs that you can basically harness and hone your pen testing operator type skills. They have their machines at different levels too, and they're community rated. So the community will say this is a hard machine or an easy machine or whatever. That way it's not just one person saying how difficult it is or is not. This is really cool. In fact, it's so cool that you can't register on the site. You literally have to hack the registration portal to be able to get a user account to log into the site. So it's kind of fun. And it's just a great resource in general to start hacking away and understanding how to really do the job. Hacking 101, which is basically a 6 hours of training. Again, it's just training. And then I wanted to call this out. This is coming up on October 14th, so you can still register for this. But it's a exploit development fundamentals course. So exploiting is basically compromising a vulnerability to allow you to do something that you shouldn't be able to, whether it's elevate your privileges or break into a box, get access to a system or turn something off, whatever. These people are doing a very introductory fundamentals course on how to write exploits. So if I've got some people in the crowd who are this sounds interesting from an operator perspective, and you like coding stuff, check this out because they're going to teach you how to write exploits, which is sick. All right. And then I think this is my final one, vulnerability assessment, right? So vulnerabilities, these are, apply your patches. There's great tools at the enterprise level where you can scan. A free open source one is called OpenVAS, VAS, if you want to try one for free. But this one is kind of like the engineer, except on the analyst side, where you are being aware of what the organizational risk posture is. You work with compliance and governance quite a bit to kind of have this moving value of what your current posture is. Because as new vulnerabilities are released, new technology becomes vulnerable, or exploits come out, or legacy end of life stuff. So if people are running Windows XP or Windows 7 went end of life in January, for example. So it's a moving thing, and it requires attention and a focused resource, if not multiple resources, depending on how large the organization is, to manage that stuff and report metrics and do a whole bunch of other stuff. So this one's great. I feel like this one's a fairly not easy, but this one's a good entry level one because a lot of the tools are very mature within this particular vertical. So you can get spun up very quick, and there's a lot of education out there. I put the pro of this one is that you get 25,000 foot view of the organization. You have a tool that scans everything, right? So you know exactly where everything is and what everything is. You know what's in the DMZ and what's not. You know what traffic's what's allowed to pass and what's not. So like you really have, you're sitting at the control panel, right? And you can see everything. So it's very, very cool from that perspective. The downside is it's the same frustrated guy, right? Again, patch your stuff. Okay, like crickets, like we're not going to patch it, like move along, and then you got to like run it up the chain and all this stuff. So it can be frustrating to know that Apache Struts vulnerability is right there, or Bluekeep comes out a couple last year, and you have a RDP listening on the DMZ, and it's just you want it to be shut off, and you can't convey enough. You can't scream loud enough into the void to get it fixed. So that can be frustrating, right? If this is something that kind of interests you, I put Nessus here. Nessus is a legit. There's like 3 main players in the vulnerability scanning space. Nessus is one of them. You can go get free education from them. They also will allow you to download and use their tool. I think you get like 17 IPs, so you could scan your home network and play with it and see how it works and stuff like that. And then, by the way, put it on your resume that you know how to use that tool and that you've got experience using it. Also a NIST document on patch management. And then US CERT actually provides, if you go to uscertcisa.gov, you can get like real-time threat awareness stuff, because understanding vulnerabilities is one thing, but like a vulnerability, they're not all equal, right? So like a vulnerability that allows remote code execution with no authentication on some like obvious external service is like the worst, right? So that means anyone in the world can touch this, and you've got it out there so that it can be touched, and they can walk right through the door without any knowledge of your infrastructure or any passwords or user accounts and stuff like that. That's the worst. That same vulnerability on a nearly air-gapped system that isn't really connected to anything is a way lower risk, and it's not a big deal, right? So if you're staying kind of up to date on your threat awareness, you might know that this threat actor is starting to look for these type of services or these type of systems on the internet. So you can kind of constantly be updating whatever your calculus is for understanding what your risk is, basically. Okay, so I've mentioned several different 2 or 3 resources per job that I've covered here, but I do manage this GitHub repo. It's a free, again, I can't emphasize enough how important it is for me to share only free content with people in our community, because I don't want money or finance or opportunity to be an impediment for anyone to be successful in this field. So this GitHub page, which will be the link will be provided as part of like the go away package or the send off package. But basically it's got, conferences, webinars, training books, those college courses I mentioned, YouTube channels that are relevant, all sorts of stuff. Like I'm going to pull up my screen right now. This is it right here. And you can see like, there's just so much free information here that it's really like, go back to what I said a minute ago. Like find the job, find the field, where is it? Find what lights you up, right? And then use those resources I'm sharing to build yourself out and get what you need to be able to go get that job and be happy, right? So, all right. So those are the 5. Those are the resources. All right. So we've covered a lot of material here in 20 minutes. But now that you've kind of seen the bigger picture, how do you put it together, right? So maybe you're listening to me talk and you're like, you know what, that cyber operator job does sound cool. I thought pen testing was awesome, but now that I realize that it's like a 6-figure job and it's a growing in demand and stuff like that, how do I do that? And not just how do I develop the skills to be able to say I am a professional or capable of being a professional operator, but I'm also able to get the job, So let's spend some time talking about that. So core skills. So I know all of you or many of you are in school right now. Hopefully, you've got some technical background, but if you don't, I will say within the cybersecurity space, yes, there are jobs that don't require an understanding of technology. There's fewer of them, and oftentimes people still need to understand technology, because if you're trying to talk about something and you have no idea what you're talking about, people will see right through that and it'll be bad for your career. So personally, in my experience, I believe the core skills that are not cybersecurity specific that you have to be successful is networking. And I'm not talking about going to like a happy hour and networking with people. I'm talking about like TCP IP stack, OSI model, that networking, right? And you don't get anxious or anything. You don't have to be a network engineer. You don't have to know, like, name all the flags that a TCP packet could have enabled. Like, it's not to that level. You need to understand how TCP, well, basically you have to understand the OSI stack, specifically the transport layer down to the physical layer. The app layer you can, take or leave. But understanding what TCP is and what UDP is specifically, understanding what IP is, IPv4, right? Like, understanding how those things and what a MAC address is and how DHCP works and why DNS exists and how it can work. Like, that's all important, because in today's like cyber threat landscape with nation state actors and like really sophisticated cyber criminal organizations that are starting to like turn into businesses where they're like modular, where they like sync up because this group's good at one thing and this group's good at another and this one's good at another, and they form like an alliance. It's very tough to battle, and they are operating at like globally, right? So if you don't understand how networks work, it's gonna hinder you from being successful, because you need to understand why something is happening. Especially, I mean, if you're gonna be a red teamer and an operator, and you're like gonna exfil data, or you're trying to probe and do open source intelligence and do recon on like your target, like what services they have running and what version are they exploitable, can I exploit and then drop a payload to get persistence? Like, all of that stuff is networking. I'm talking about what services are listening at the transport layer, and I'm with IP addresses, obviously. Like, so I'm telling you, you got to get networking down at least at a foundational conversation level. The other one that I feel is just going to keep you from being successful is understanding operating systems. Now, again, you don't need to know how like a page file writes out to disk or anything like that, or how multi-threading works and stuff like that. What you need to understand is like user land and kernel space, right? Like you need to understand why having root access on a machine is bad, right? Or why the threat actors are trying to get root access, or how processes execute really in memory, and what memory is, and all these other things. Like, basically what I'm trying to tell you is you need foundational knowledge of networking and operating systems. Those are the two things. There's a bunch that will help you if you had experience with, but these two, I would argue, are a requirement to be successful in cybersecurity. I put programming here with an asterisk because a lot of people will say programming is needed, or I should learn to program and stuff like that. I would argue I know how to program. I came up as a software engineer until I found out about cybersecurity. Programming does help, and it's particularly good if you're on the red team or the blue team, operator or incident responder side of the house, blue team, red team, because a lot of times open source tools are written in like interpreted languages, so you can see the source code. And sometimes tools they're not going to work in your particular environment or whatever. And being able to understand how to read code and then make modifications to code really, really does help. But it's not required. You can just go find another tool, or you can kind of like figure it out, like the way that you might not understand a language in a foreign country, but you kind of just figure it out. Like, you can order food, or you can point at a picture or something like that. Like, it's very similar. So programming, it will help. I wouldn't spend cycles keeping you from entering the job market, or going after your job or whatever, because you don't understand programming. So I'll leave that there. Now, soft skills. So just to define these, hard skills are like technical skills. Like, I know how to use Kali Linux. I know how to run a network vulnerability scan. These are hard skills. Soft skills are like compassion, empathy, active listening. Like, they're human skills that really are important. So I recently saw a quote that said, what is it? Like, nobody wants to hire the brilliant jerk, right? This is true, and it resonates. It's absolutely true. I've been in industry for 15 years. Like you could be the smartest person who could write the sickest tools. And if you are really arrogant and a jerk and just not pleasant to be around, you're not going to get hired because people don't want to be around you. It doesn't matter what you know. So that soft skill is understanding that. And really, if you're going to be working like on the vulnerability assessment side or the engineer side, remember I talked about engaging with other parties like infrastructure or networking or whatever. Like these soft skills come in handy because you need to be able to effectively communicate and be able to understand their position and communicate your position in a persuasive way. And then if you want to go vertical on the career path, yes, you can focus wicked hard on the technical side, but more and more in the industry, like in the last like 5 or 6 years, there has been a shift from the CISO, which is like the Chief Information Security Officer. There's been a shift from like having a wicked technical CISO reporting under the CIO, mind you, to this idea that the CISO is more like business minded and risk minded. They're getting a seat at the board of directors table, or not a seat, but they're presenting to the board. And all this means is that cultural, that tone at the top of the business-minded CISO is going to obviously trickle down through the information security office, and being able to communicate effectively and understand other people's positions, and then negotiate, compromise, what have you, is going to be huge. And this is like one of those things where like it's just not going to be taught in a cybersecurity course. But this is really good for any professional gig. But within the cybersecurity space, it's really you hear it all the time, like, oh, like I don't speak geek or I don't speak techie or whatever. Like there's a language barrier between the people who are trying to convey how serious an incident is or how serious a vulnerability is to the business who is just trying to get business done. It's like you cannot be running Windows XP. Like this is a real bad thing. We need to upgrade it. And this person's like, well, there's $1 million device and we've only recovered $800,000 of billable sales off of it. Say it's an MRI machine. Like we need it for another at least $200,000 worth of stuff. Okay, like I understand. Let's talk about how we can come to an agreement where the system is not introducing risk to the organization, but you're still able to run it. Maybe you air gap it. Maybe you put a firewall, a little personal one in between that machine and the network, whatever. But you don't just go in with a hammer and say, shut it down or just patch it. Like you suck. Like you don't know, like you've got to have soft skills. I can't emphasize it enough. If you don't develop soft skills, it's going to limit you. Okay. Now, professional networking. Now, this is the happy hour, elbow rubbing type thing. Now, I think I have a slide coming up here about conferences, but professional networking, I want to tell you guys, when I was coming up through my undergrad and stuff like that, like I was just in a book. I thought hard skills was all you need. I'm applying to a ton of jobs. I'm not getting any. I finally get one. I got, it was kind of a bad situation, but professional network, if I'd known about it, if someone had told me, it would have been a different story. So like I saw some anecdotal research recently that said 50% of jobs that are, basically people who got jobs in 2020, 50% of them were never posted. They came from having someone know someone who needed a job or was interested in a new opportunity and would be a good fit. And if you think about it for a second from an organizational perspective, like writing up a job posting, having a need, then writing it up, then soliciting it, then having people come apply, sifting through resumes, doing interviews, finally selecting, going through negotiation for salary. It's very, very time consuming. It would be so much easier for the business to just be like, oh, like we've got a great person, like, like here's their resume, and kind of shuffle them right through, and then boom, there you go. So by professional networking, what I say is you can do this many ways. And even in the COVID era, you can still successfully professional network. And a couple ways that I would highlight as like actionable takeaways is like on LinkedIn, which is a very, very popular social, like business social platform, which I'm going to cover in a second here. But read some people's posts who write about cybersecurity and then comment something thoughtful. Don't just comment like, yeah, or thumbs up or whatever. Like actually think about it and then provide some like value adding comment, even if it's like, oh, like this is interesting, I saw a similar report here, or like it doesn't, you don't have to like, blow minds away or anything like that, but engage professionally, demonstrate that you are a professional in this space. This is something that will take a while. This is like growing a plant. Like you got to put the seed in, you got to water it, you got to maintain it, and you're not going to get results instantly. This is something that takes time, but once you've developed a professional network, people already know you. One of the things about getting a job really in industry is trust. Like, I don't know you. And it's not that I don't trust you. Like, I think you're going to steal my wallet. I just don't know you. I don't know if you're good at your job. I don't know if you're bad. I don't know if you have soft skills or you're a brilliant jerk. By doing professional networking, you start engaging with people. You start letting them know who you are, how you think, what's important, what are your perspective, what's your professional interests. By doing that, you start expanding your network and people start to know you. And then when opportunities come up or you put on LinkedIn, hey, I'm looking for a job or whatever, like these things will start coming to fruition. The plant will start growing, right? And then, you can meet people at conferences, same thing. Also, another way to professional network, if you are doing like in-person stuff, is to volunteer. Volunteering is awesome, A, because you feel good about it because you're volunteering, but B, you are meeting a bunch of other people who are in the same field. Typically, cybersecurity conferences are run by cybersecurity people. So you're meeting people in the field, you're volunteering, you're working with them, you're establishing professional network connections. And it's not about a quid pro quo. You're not volunteering so they'll give you something. You're not asking them to like review your resume. Like you're just networking and establishing who you are. This is a long game play, but you guys are in school still. Like take advantage of this. Even academic conferences, like coordinate with your peers. So anyways, big one. Another thing in cybersecurity that I can't emphasize enough, and this is really going to be a telling tale for you personally. You have to be honest with yourself. Okay, one second. Okay, cybersecurity as an industry, it's really, really cool, and I love it for the reason that it's constantly changing. There's innovative solutions for attacking nation state. Threat actors are always coming up with interesting ways to attack. On the tail of that, the defensive side is figuring out interesting ways to defend. And every time, it's like a cat and mouse game. Every time they defend against something, the attacking side comes up with a new tool or circumvention or anything like that. And there's like all sorts of new tech, right? So you see like Bluetooth's been in the news about it being compromised, cloud-based apps, just a million things attacking two-factor authentication. Maybe like 2 months ago, there was a huge thing on Twitter where like very, very, very popular, famous accounts of celebrities got taken, like Bill Gates and Elon Musk and stuff like that, even though they had two-factor in place. So you need to spend, I would argue, like at least 30 minutes a day or a couple hours a week minimum reading news. And I've just included a couple popular ones, like Krebs on Security is a very popular one. He's an investigative cybersecurity journalist. He often breaks big stories. And then Threat Post is another one. There's a bunch of different ones. So don't think that these are the only two. But what I'm trying to tell you is you can't just read a textbook and be like, I'm good to go in 2021. Like you need to be abreast of what is going on today in the news, because if you're trying to defend your organization, like our organization, your organization, wherever you're working, your school, like that network is on the same internet that, Iran and Pakistan and Israel and North Korea and China and the United States government, they're all on the same internet. There's one battlefield, right? So like you can be targeted and you can be attacked. There's no like, is it Sweden? I think it's Sweden, right? Or the Swiss, whatever. Like there's no neutral territory. So knowing what is going on is very important, right? And plus, by the way, when you're in an interview and they ask you a question that's kind of generic based, yeah, okay, so explain to us, Jerry, candidate Jerry, what is a SQL injection attack? Well, a SQL injection attack, blah, here's the academic textbook definition of it is. And what's really interesting is that it's been around for 20 years, but it continues to be a valid form of attack, as was just recently noticed where, whatever, like Hidden Cobra or whatever APT 29, like recently attacked the Bangladesh national bank with a SQL injection attack and blah 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 blah. So like you're you're basically A, answering the question really well for the interviewer, and then B, you're demonstrating that you are into the field. You get it. You're staying abreast. Like when I interview people, I've interviewed and hired tons of people. Like when I interview them, if they are just like if they're not aware of what's going on in the world, it's very much a negative in my opinion, because how can you be effective at your job if it's this constantly changing thing and you're not even like aware of it, you know? So I just point this out. So please do that. Again, conferences, cybersecurity has a great community. There is some toxicity within the community, but I've been able to avoid it. So you guys can avoid it as well. I put B-Sides Ottawa here. B-Sides is like these homegrown ones. I think this is close to you guys. I hope so. I tried Googling what would be close to you guys and finding a conference that was coming up. So check out a security B-Sides, maybe volunteer. Red Team Village, again, I wanted to point out that like there's general conferences like a B-Sides, which is kind of general cybersecurity. You might get some various different diverse talks. Then there's villages like Red Team Village, which was just recent for DEF CON, where it's all focused on the offensive side. It's people giving talks on how to get in offense, operator side, how to attack systems, how to, again, got to stay up on the news, right? So Kubernetes, that's like very popular right now, right? Containerizing applications to make them run on whatever platform. It's very cool. So there's whole like Red Team talks about how to take over Kubernetes, how to break Kubernetes, exploit Kubernetes, right? So, you know, depending on what your passion is and what you're into, maybe you haven't figured it out yet, then go to some of these and see if something lights your fire. Go to the general ones and check out whatever. But if you have found what you like, start zeroing in on those talks. And by the way, when I talked about professional networking too, like once you start like down a path, like let's say Red Team, there are certain people in the Red Team community who are borderline celebrities basically, but they're accessible. We don't have like divas, really. I mean, there's a couple, but like most part, people are very accessible. Because of COVID, like I've met a ton of people I've never met in person, who I regularly now socialize with on either Slack or Discord or whatever, LinkedIn, because I met them at these villages and stuff like that. So there's a wealth of opportunity. You just have to go. You just have to do it, you know? I just included this real quick. I did a YouTube video on it last week that was actually pretty popular, which is what is on the right. That's the thumbnail. I just included my follows. These are people on social media that I would recommend you check out. You can go afterwards and look at this. Some of these are YouTube, some of these are Twitter, some of these are LinkedIn. But it's a good mix, right? So there's some pen testing people. There's Apple security guy. There's a digital forensics person. There's incident response. So check out some of these resources. I personally follow them. I just told you should stay informed on the industry. This is how I do it. This is it right here. Okay. Okay. So now it's not just what you know and how well you can talk, but people have to find you. You have to like basically sell yourself, right? That's what you're doing when you go for a job. You're selling the product of you to them, whoever the organization is. So LinkedIn is become, since Microsoft bought them a few years ago, it's become like a real dynamic, integrated platform. It's not just to find a job anymore, but there are jobs posted on there. You can find jobs this way, but a lot of professionals are engaging on the platform. And then you can, you know, obviously use it to kind of like show off yourself and et cetera. So I wanted to point out a couple like very easy to do best practices that I would recommend that you should implement as soon as possible, because you make the change once and then it just persists, right? So it's like very great return on your investment of your time. On your LinkedIn page, get LinkedIn, first of all, it's free. Get LinkedIn, put a picture of yourself that's professional. Don't do one that's like, like someone's arm is on your shoulder and you just like cropped your head out. Like take whatever. We all have phones with cameras nowadays. Just stand next to a blank wall, snap a photo. I think that's what this one is. And boom, just crop it. You're done. Picture's there. Put a banner image. This one I made to look fancy or whatever, but like just something that has your name or has something that isn't just the default one, something that has some call out to the person who goes there. Because basically anyone that goes to your profile page, that's going to be the very first thing that they see. If it's not your profile photo, it's your profile banner. So maybe you put like what you're into, or a link to your Twitter, or whatever. Just take advantage of that real estate. On your role, a lot of people will have right here. So I also own a small, I own a small business, a consulting business that I do for some small businesses and stuff. So that's what this is. But a lot of people will have here like what their job is. So like it might, right now it might say like Jane Doe, like your name, Jane Doe, student or grad student, right? Like it's just it defaults to have whatever your role is at the first job you have in your list. You can really take advantage of that. And I would encourage you to do that. Whatever you would have at the top of your resume for like what your objective is, or why would someone want to hire you? What value are you bringing to that organization? Put it in a powerful sentence right here. You can work it, but that person's going to read it and they're going to be like, oh, okay, like this person, like they give small businesses peace of mind. Like I'm a business and I don't know anything about cybersecurity. This guy's going to give me peace of mind. I'm going to engage with this guy and get some work. So take advantage of that. That's another one that is like a soft thing, right? It's easy to do. You put it in place and you're good to go. Again, think of your purpose and stuff like that. So just some little pro tips on LinkedIn. Now, some people will say, I have no experience in the field. I've got this great degree. I've done some research projects, but I can't really put that on on my resume. I have my objective, I have my education, and then my work experience is blank. And, I feel like it's preventing me from getting the job or getting the interview or getting forward. So one kind of hack, if you will, that is an option is quote unquote hiring yourself. So HackerOne and BugCrowd, for example, they're two of the larger ones. They are vulnerability management, like bug management platforms. So basically what the gist is here is that companies like Tesla and Ford and IBM and whoever, they will say, hey, we want people to try to find bugs in our systems. But they're not going to work directly with 10,000 individuals, right? So they hire HackerOne and BugCrowd to kind of manage that deal. They're the belly button between the business and the hackers. And they'll say like you can attack anything at Tesla.com. Like if it's on the website, if it's anything Tesla.com, so ftp.tesla.com, mail.tesla.com, www.tesla.com, all free game. You can attack it, find bugs, and you can submit them to HackerOne or to BugCrowd, and then it gets tested, verified, and then you get paid, right? So Tesla might give you $25,000 if you find a bug or whatever. So what's great about this is you can literally put on your resume, and it's completely legit, that you're an independent security researcher, and whatever tech skills you may have picked up along the way, like using Burp Suite, which is a popular tool in the bug bounty space, or network scanning tools like Nmap, which is a very popular one. You can put those in there, and now you have a work experience section of your resume. And by the way, if you actually find some bugs and get paid and stuff like that, that's very interesting. Put that in the resume, because that makes you stand out as like you've accomplished and succeeded, and you've able to do reporting and stuff like that. So it's really, really cool, and it's a great way to get work experience without having to like go get a job, right? Because that's always a catch-22. And then one final thing. So maybe you can't get into cybersecurity right off the rip. The idea of an entry-level cyber job is sometimes mutated, because sometimes they want someone with like a couple years of IT experience, and then you get an entry-level cyber job. So if your path takes you into corporate industry, but you're not in cyber, but you really want to get there, I would strongly encourage you, wherever you go, wherever you end up. Again, you should be professionally networking with cyber people at this point, and you're engaging and you're doing conferences and you're staying informed. So you're ready, you're plugged in, you just need the opportunity. If you can identify yourself to the cybersecurity department or office or person, whatever, at your organization, you're already trusted as a resource, you're getting paid anyways. You can tell them, hey, how can I help? Or, I mentioned earlier that the vulnerability person gets frustrated because they can't get infrastructure to fix it. Well, maybe you could say, hey, I work in infrastructure. I'd love to help you accomplish your goals. But I want to know more about it. So now you start working as like a security champion. We have hired people on my team right now who like worked within infrastructure, but they demonstrated competency first and foremost, right? They demonstrated passion, they demonstrated interest, and when we wanted to hire a job, like when we wanted to open a job, we said, oh, wait a minute, like, what about, Tina? Like Tina's like, she already knows all this stuff. She's already been doing it kind of like, why don't we just bring her onto the team? We've got budget now. Let's bring her on. Let's see if she wants to do it. Hey, do you want to? Yeah, it'd be a dream job. So there are opportunities that may not be the obvious traditional storybook career path, but be aware of them. That's what I want you to know. There's many different ways to achieve your goal. And these are some of the tools and methods that can help you achieve them. So I'm going to open it there. If you want to connect with me afterwards, for whatever reason, these are 3 excellent ways. I check these quite often to continue to engage with me after the fact. And I will open it up if anyone has any questions or would like some clarification or just wants to talk.
So you can unmute yourself and then ask questions, or you can just post it in the chat.
Hi, Gerald. Great webinar, first of all. Thank you for hosting it. I had a question regarding like projects that you can work on beyond the bug bounties to show that you have an understanding of the concepts if you don't have any experience.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So a couple other opportunities that I would encourage. One is you can do open source, so like open source tool development and stuff like that. I don't know if you're a strong programmer, if that's your bag, but you can work in the open source world. Again, this is one of those ones where you're basically volunteering and contributing, kind of the way when I mentioned volunteering at a conference. You can do that. I mentioned at the beginning, I run that GitHub page and I have 11 contributors. A couple of them contribute regularly, to the point now where like I've engaged them directly and personally and had conversations. And now I've actually developed like some professional relationships with those individuals. Another interesting one, and I wish I had mentioned it during my talk, but I'm glad you asked the question, are CTFs. So capture the flag contests. They're not exclusively run at conferences, but there's often a CTF or capture the flag contest going on at the conference. And just this year at DEF CON, for example, I spent all my time in the Red Team Village, and they had a CTF running, but their contest was set up in such a way that they actually had employers who were going to interview the top 10 finishers of the CTF for jobs like right then. And it's one of those ones where like, you could be awkward and feel anxious at interviews and your resume looks terrible. But like in this particular vein, you were demonstrating competency in a specific niche field that those employers needed now. And they were set up to like offer jobs right there at the conference. So that's another particular angle that you can get involved with. And then of course, because you guys are in academia, another really interesting approach is to kind of reach out to, I don't know if they have PhD programs where y'all are at, but like if you can get hooked into research, so there's like a ton of research with grant money and stuff like that. And oftentimes the principal investigator has great ideas, but they can hire someone to do kind of the grunt work. So you could be the person doing the grunt work, but what that gives you access to is you get your name on the paper. You are working professional networking with the PI who obviously got the grant and did all that stuff. And you're getting experience with some particular facet of cybersecurity, right? It might not be what you want, right? Maybe they're doing research on Bluetooth. Maybe you figure out, hey, I don't really like Bluetooth, or this is my passion and I love it. I'm going to pursue it. So those are a couple of different ideas that just come to the top of my head.
Okay. All right.
Thanks for the question.
Hi, Professor. I had a quick question. I want to say just thanks for the lecture. I think it was really clear and informative. My question relates to, is CompTIA and the certifications like CompTIA 1001, 1002, Network Plus, Linux Plus, and et cetera, are those things needed to get a job? And also, I often heard that you need to start off as a sysadmin before you can get to the different jobs mentioned earlier. Is that true or false? What do you think?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So good question. I didn't touch on certifications. So, okay, a couple things. One, I'll talk about the certifications, and then I'll talk about the entry points to the field. So certifications, I would say, so I always argue that Security Plus is like the entry level certification. Like it does not hurt to get it. It will open some doors to get it. The Network Plus, the A Plus and stuff like that. I personally feel that those don't carry as much weight if you're wanting to get into cybersecurity. I mentioned that you need to understand kind of foundationally the network, like network technologies and protocols and stuff like that. Network Plus would demonstrate that. But for me personally, if I'm interviewing you for a job, whether or not you have Network Plus, I'm going to know, like, because there'll be some questions in the interview that are like, it'll just come out. Like if you mention DNS or something like that, or you use, IPv, like you say something, like in a cybersecurity interview, like concepts of networking will come out naturally. So I wouldn't invest my money personally or time into the Networking Plus one. I would look at the Security Plus one. Also, it's less popular, but the ISC Squared has one called SSCP, which is kind of comparable to the Security Plus, but worth looking at. But in the industry, Security Plus is recognized as like the entry level certificate. So like if I see someone who's applying to an entry level job with Sec Plus, like to me it seems obvious. Like, okay, yes, that person's already made a commitment to the field, and like there's a certain level of minimum comprehension that I would expect from that individual who has that certification. So I would say that, and then CISSP is the next one that's kind of like the industry standard that you would want to get, but you need 5 years in the field to get that. But since we're talking about it, now for the entry point into the field, really there are three, I would say like 90% of people who get into cyber, there's three main ways to get in. It's not 100% of the people, but the bulk of it. So there's three. One is you're a sysadmin of some type, either you're a server admin or network engineer or something like that. That is one way. Very popular, right? Because you understand the tech stack, you know how it does work, and now you can understand how to secure it from working inappropriately. The other one that's popular is software engineer. That's the track I came through. So I was a software engineer and found out about security. When you're in that regard, you're writing code, right? So you understand how it's supposed to work and how systems interface, and you can understand how bugs might get introduced, obviously. And then the third one that's kind of popular is like an auditor or risk auditor or something like that. Those are the popular ones. Again, they're not exclusive, but as I mentioned before, like having that operating system and networking foundation is so important to the trajectory of your career that it's popular. The sysadmin, server admin type role is incredibly popular because they already have a very, very strong understanding of those two particular elements. So, so it doesn't preclude you from getting the job, but it would help you if you were a sysadmin. A lot of people come up through help desk too. That's another popular one. If you graduate and you can't get a job or whatever, another popular one is to get, especially if you don't have a tech background, is to get help desk experience. And then once you're inside, do that internal thing I told you about where you demonstrate, hey, I want to do this. You go get the Sec Plus while you're paying your bills, doing help desk. You're getting the soft skills that I mentioned are important because you're dealing with people who have problems every single day. Like that's what your job is. So I've seen that path for a lot of people yield success as well. These are great questions too. Thank you, everybody.
So someone asked if there's any specific certifications to look at as a starter.
Can you repeat that? Is there any what?
Specific certifications to look at as a starter.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Security Plus really is where I would recommend you go. I mean, it's kind of recognized, at least in the United States. I mean, it's recognized as the entry level cybersecurity certification. Certification. There's certain, like, you'll see it on a lot of jobs, like must have security plus, and that's just a way for HR to kind of ensure some minimum level of competency. So it doesn't hurt you. I don't think it's. I don't want to say it's. I mean, you do have to study for it, right? Especially if you're not already working in the field. But I don't think it's too expensive either. Some organizations. Oh, here's another like hack if you want to hack. Another way you can do it is, like, say you're going to get Security Plus. Like, let's just say you're going to graduate in May and you don't have Sec Plus yet, but you're going to get it because you think it's going to help. You can put it on your resume as like security, like, you have to be honest, right? So you register for it, get the materials, and say you're going to take the exam on September 1st. So in June, you put it on your resume as like Security Plus projected date September 1st. So now you have it on your resume. So any HR screening tools that are weeding you out based on keywords in your resume are going to pick that up and be okay. And then B, you're showing that you're committing to the craft and that you're working on it. You're not misleading or lying by saying you have it when you don't. But that's another way that you can kind of reap the benefits of it without actually having it yet, to be precluded from or excluded from a qualifying position. Just whatever. You guys could take or leave that particular tip, but I mean, it works.
So one last question. What's the work-life balance for cyber operator?
Work-life balance of the specific cyber operator role? Yeah. I would actually say that one is not, that one's pretty good because you're the attacker, right? So with the cyber operator, the way that most of them work when they're not like weaponized, like they work for the military, the government or something like that, like most of them, it's like you schedule a assessment, right? So I'm going to come to your business on Monday and we're going to do our test all week. And then we're going to write a report and leave on Friday. So it's very predictable hours. It does involve some travel, but often it depends on what type of assessment, but oftentimes you can do it remote because that's part of what they want to understand is what's their exposure from the internet. I would say that the only downside, or not only downside, like I mentioned, writing reports, a lot of people don't like that are in the field, but part of the downside is like a little bit of stress because like you don't want to go like by successfully taking advantage and exploiting their systems and popping shells and getting the crown jewels or whatever. That's demonstrating that you are providing value and that you kick butt. So if it's a 5-day engagement and it's Thursday and you still haven't successfully compromised the system, you know, you're going to show up Friday empty-handed and you're either going to say, oh, I was unable to successfully do anything and your defense is really good, or, you know, you're just going to say I couldn't do it. And then you look bad, right? So it can be I've seen some people who get super anxious and super stressed out because they haven't successfully compromised the systems, you know, getting near the end of the engagement. So that's the only downside, I guess, of it. I mean, cyber operators are really cool. I mean, not only is it a cool field, but like it's becoming more and more common, right? So like being a pen tester used to be more niche and kind of specialized. You'd have to be former NSA to like really get a job in the field. But now like major organizations like Netflix has an entire department of red teamers because their entire platform is digital and they cannot go down. Think about Netflix. They went down for like a week, right? That's insane. So they have a whole department of people who are actually attacking Netflix all the time. It's very cool. They're actually an interesting case study, but yeah. So work-life balance is pretty good. There can be a little bit of anxiety, but yeah. So I see some questions here in the chat. Is there a guide to writing reports? There's no definitive guide. If you look at the Kali, so Kali's the distro that a lot of pen testers use as kind of their OS, right? It comes preloaded with a bunch of tools and stuff like that. The Kali Linux documentation, there's a whole book called, I think it's called Kali Linux Unleashed or something. It's free on their Kali Linux website. They have a whole section on how to write reports for pen testers. You may want to check that out. So you could probably also, you might be able to Google and just kind of get like sample pen test report and see what people have put out there. It's a topic that is spoken at conferences quite a bit. So, Alibaba Cloud. I don't know much about Alibaba Cloud. I know that they're like the Amazon of China, but I couldn't tell you what the footprint is of them, or how important it would be to learn their stuff. So I will mention too, like with AWS, I don't know much about Google, but I know a lot about Microsoft Azure. And a lot of the things, like people who go into Azure, they do like a lift and shift of their on-prem data center, right? So like it's basically just putting servers in the cloud, which is not really what the cloud's optimized for. AWS is way different. Yes, you can have servers and stuff up there, but AWS is more like services that integrate with each other, and it's a completely different paradigm. So like, don't just think if you're good at system administration on a traditional network, right, with endpoints and servers and stuff like that, that you've got it with AWS. AWS is totally different, which is why I called it out as a specific one. Not only is it huge footprint in the market, but it's definitely a different animal altogether. Oh, thank you. Thanks for the link to Kali there.
So
All
I
right.
think there's no questions. Thank you so much, Dr. Auger, for this presentation. It was really good. It was really informative. We learned a lot. And I'll post the recordings and the sources to the social media on our website soon.
All right. Yeah. And thank you for having me. I really enjoyed myself. Again, if anyone wants to continue the conversation, just hit me up on LinkedIn, send me a connect, and I'll be happy to connect with you. I'm always posting crap on LinkedIn, so you can work on that professional networking tip I dropped earlier and engage with me. So thank you.
Also, follow and subscribe Simply Cyber on YouTube. It's a really good channel. There's a lot of informative videos.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. All right, everybody. Cheers. Have a great evening. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.